At 9:05 a.m., a white plastic mail crate slid onto my porch like a beached cooler after a long tailgate. The delivery van jolted over the curb, the back door popped, and the crate surfed across my welcome mat. The driver glanced in his mirror, lifted a palm that looked halfway between sorry and good luck, and rolled on. I stared at the crate. It was zip-tied at the corners and had a thick rubber band cinching the middle like a belt that had seen too many Thanksgiving dinners. Inside, letters from my entire cul-de-sac in Raleigh, North Carolina. Bills, postcards, catalogs with glossy pictures of jackets nobody needs in August. I nudged the crate with my sneaker. It gave a soft clink, like a bucket of seashells. 2 nights earlier, a storm had shoved one of those community mailbox clusters, gray metal, 12 little doors, down the street and halfway into Mrs. Lee's azaleas. The thing lay on its side, looking stunned. My neighbor Dan tied it to his fence with an orange extension cord and said a crew would come soon. Soon, I'd learned, is a flexible word. Now the mail had arrived, but the mailbox had not. I called the post office. After a cheerful robot and 3 minutes of flute music, a human voice told me to secure the mail and await a resolution. I looked at the crate, then at the sky, which was a shade of blue that said it could change its mind whenever it liked. "What does secure mean?" I asked. The person said, "Don't leave it unattended." And then the line went silent with that particular government silence that feels like a small door closing. I brought the crate inside and set it on my kitchen table. My table is oak and a little wobbly, the kind of wobble you learn to sit around with the grace of a person who knows which corner not to lean on. The crate tilted, so I steadied it with a bag of flour. The flour bag sagged in a friendly way, like a neighbor who doesn't mind staying late. A postcard sat on top, a purple sunset over somewhere flat, the kind of place the wind owns. On the back, someone had written in tight, hopeful handwriting, "First time away from home." It was addressed to Maya for 10B. I didn't know a Maya at 410B. I didn't know my block had a 410B. We had numbers in the 30s, mostly. 30-something A, B, sometimes C if a ranch house had been cut in half back in the 70s. The crate held maps and mysteries, and I felt the pull of both. I told myself I'd sort the mail by streets, then by house number, then find someone at each address who looked like a person who answered doors before noon. I wrote the plan on a sticky note, because plans feel steadier when you can stick them to a thing. I gathered rubber bands, grabbed a pen that only worked if you scribbled first, and poured a glass of water. I drank half and left the rest as if the glass were a checkpoint I'd return to, proof that I was a person who stayed hydrated while doing civic things. The first stack was easy. My street, split into A, B, and a mysterious C that I was sure the city kept secret on purpose. Bills for Mr. Alvarez, who always waved with 2 hands, like he was guiding a plane to a gate. A newsletter for the garden club, folded into a neat accordion. A soft, cloth envelope with a return address from a quilting store in Missouri. It smelled faintly of lavender and dust, which is exactly how I imagine Missouri quilting stores smell. And then there it was, half buried. A light green envelope with a bright red stripe that said expedited. Someone had written time sensitive in thick black marker. The name, Arturo Benitez, 44C. I didn't know Arturo. I didn't know a 44C. The return address was a county office not far from downtown. I put it on top of the stack like a tiny crown. I thought about calling the post office again, but the whole scene made me feel like the understudy in a play whose lead had sprained an ankle. A crate full of lines. A neighborhood waiting. I looked at the clock, 9:21. It felt both early and late. "Okay," I said out loud, the way you say "okay" when you're alone and want to hear a voice agree with you. I pulled on my sneakers, the ones with the thin soles that make it feel like the sidewalk is speaking directly to your feet. I put the green envelope in a zip pocket on my windbreaker like it was the instructions to a complicated magic trick. I tied the rubber bands into little families and tucked each family around a street's worth of mail. On my fridge, I keep a laminated map that shows our blocks like puzzle pieces. My aunt sent it to me when I moved to Raleigh, saying, "You're a map person, even if you don't know it yet." She was right in the way aunts often are. I taped a fresh sticky note to the map and drew a star where my house sits. Then I drew a slow, looping line through the streets, past the park where the swings complain, past the corner where a food truck sells empanadas on Fridays, past the church that posts riddles on its sign. "Grace is free," the sign had said last week, "but you still have to pick it up." I lifted the crate, surprised by how much a neighborhood weighs when you carry it all at once. Down the porch steps I went, wobble left, steady right, onto the sidewalk. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass and charcoal, though it was too early for burgers. A blue jay landed on the mailbox by my front walk and scolded me in a way that suggested an important union rule was being broken. I told him I was a volunteer. He wasn't impressed. At the end of the block, the fallen mailbox still lay tied like a patient, orange cord bright against the dull gray. Mrs. Lee stood beside it with pruning shears like a sheriff with a badge. "Any word?" she asked, looking at the crate with the seriousness people reserve for newborns and wedding cakes. "Not yet," I said. "I'm making rounds." "Good," she said, nodding at the green envelope peeking from my pocket the way hawks notice chipmunks. "Mind the dogs at 36B. They mean well, but they're lousy at expressing it." I promised to mind them and took a breath that made itself at home inside my chest. My street leaned downhill like it wanted to show me something. I let it. I was, for the day, the mailman, or a mailman-shaped idea, and I wanted to do the job right, or at least kindly, which sometimes is the same thing. I tucked the crate into my hip and started walking, carrying everyone's ordinary stories in paper jackets, moving them toward the places where, for better or worse, they belonged. A neighborhood reveals itself in layers when you walk it with purpose. The first layer is noise, lawn mowers yawning, a basketball thumping somewhere, wind making a flag whisper. The second layer is what people put on their porches, bird feeders shaped like lighthouses, wind chimes made from spoons, a camp chair faded by 10 different summers. The third layer is faces. That's the one that takes time, and it's the best. At 34A, a teen in a t-shirt that said Tuesday, even though it was Thursday, opened the door and took a stack of letters without looking at them. "Thanks," he said, eyes drifting back to a skateboard propped in the hall like a scene partner. "This is a one-time thing," I said, which he heard as hail is falling, because he nodded politely and closed the door. At 35B, I met a dog named Walnut who believed the front step belonged to him. He strolled onto my shoelaces and examined my crate with concern. "It's official business," I told him. He gave me the look dogs give when you name a human concept and expect them to file it. His owner, a white-haired woman in a sweater the color of foxgloves, slid open the storm door. "You found my quilting class," she said, lifting the soft envelope like a pie from a window. "We're trading patterns this month. Missouri writes like she sews, neat and daring." I don't know what neat and daring means in a quilt, but I know what it means in a person, and she had both. She handed me a peppermint. "The hard kind," she said, "keeps the road steady." Walnut sniffed my pocket afterward and decided we could be friends in a measured way. By 40A, I developed a rhythm. Knock, step back, smile with the calm of someone who knows a little secret about how the day ends, with all the letters where they should be. People opened doors in their daytime selves. No makeup, socks without partners, hair that had not yet made promises to the public. "Bless you," one woman said, like I'd mowed her lawn. "This is very neighborly," said a man who looked like he'd just discovered that word in a book and wanted to try it out loud. I kept the green envelope tucked away, checking it every 10 minutes, as if it might molt. 44C remained a riddle. Our numbers skipped around like kids in a sprinkler. 41A lived beside 43B because that's where the big oak allowed driveways. I asked Dan, who was stretching a bungee cord across his truck bed. 44C, he said. Sounds like the cluster by the old tennis courts. The condos back there run on the alphabet. He pointed his chin toward a stand of trees that had organized themselves into a polite, shady tunnel. Before I turned toward the tunnel, I stopped at 38C, where a young mom balanced a baby on her hip with the poise of a juggler who decided to specialize. "You're my hero," she whispered, taking a small mountain of catalogs. "These keep me company during naps. I never buy, but I like to imagine I do. Imagining is free if you keep it small." The baby reached for the crate with a hand the size of a figure. I let her touch the corner. "Paper," I said. She blinked like I'd revealed the world's true name. At the park, I sat on a bench and retied my laces. Sweat found a home in my eyebrows. A girl shot past on a scooter, ponytail flagging. "You're the male guy?" she asked mid-swish. "Today," I said. "Cool," she said, and I felt knighthood bloom in a very modest way. The tunnel led to the old tennis courts, now a chalky ghost of the sport. Beyond them, the condos rose, two-story buildings the color of oatmeal, staircases pinned to the sides like thoughts. I found 44, followed by A and B, each with a neat brass letter. C was missing. I circled the building as if it might be playing hide-and-seek. A woman carrying a flats of marigolds paused. "Lost, half lost," I said, lifting the green envelope, which gave me a sensation of presenting identification. "Looking for 44C, Arturo Benitez." The woman adjusted the marigolds, which made a sound like soft applause. "C is tucked behind the laundry room. A secret staircase. He keeps his radio on old standards. Nice man. Retired tailor. He hemmed my wedding dress when I changed my mind about shoes." She smiled at the memory, which came back to her with genuine surprise, as if it had been waiting in the bushes. I thanked her and found the laundry room by following the smell of warm cotton. Sure enough, a skinny staircase hugged the back wall, leading to a door with a small C next to the number, like a whisper of a letter. I knocked, once then again. Sinatra crooned inside about a moon that belonged to no one. Footsteps approached, careful and unhurried. The door opened. "Señor Benitez?" I said. He was compact, with silver hair that seemed to remember a younger haircut. He wore a navy shirt with threads hanging from his cuffs in a way that, for a tailor, felt like a signature. His eyes were sharp, but kind sharp, like a needle held by a friend. "Yes?" he said, and I saw the moment a person puts down a worry they've been carrying all morning. I held up the envelope. "Special delivery," I said, feeling the little drama of that phrase help the air sit the right way between us. He took it and pressed his thumb against the flap the way you test bread for doneness. "Gracias," he said. "I have been waiting." I stepped back to give him space to open it if he wanted. He invited me in with a small movement of his left hand, a gesture that said company without being a whole speech. Inside, a Singer machine on a table, spools in a rainbow arc, a measuring tape laying across a chair like a sleeping cat. He set the envelope down, then changed his mind and picked it up again. "Coffee?" he asked. "I make it light. I am told this is the American way." "Light is good," I said, feeling suddenly aware that the day had slid to late morning without asking. He poured into 2 mugs that said Raleigh in fonts that announced they had been gifts. He broke the seal on the envelope and pulled out a square piece of paper dense with official language, the kind that wears a tie to breakfast. He read, "The room changed, the way rooms do when news lands." He looked up. His eyes were glossy, but not sad. "They got me an appointment," he said, tapping the date. "I needed this. I was afraid it would come late, or not at all." He folded the letter with a precision that made the paper behave better than it wanted to. He set it on the table like a compass. "You are a good neighbor," he said. "Sit. I will fix your sleeve. It is trying to go its own way." I looked down. A button had been wobbly for weeks, quietly campaigning for independence. I sat. He threaded a needle with a speed that looked like memory more than motion. Sinatra changed to a trumpet. The world, which had been busy and wide, felt briefly close and specific. A needle, a button, the promise of a date circled on a calendar. I realized that what I was really delivering, without meaning to, was time. And that, for a minute, felt like the best job I never applied for. By lunchtime, the crate was featherlight. I'd met a retired bus driver who still woke at 5 because the habit liked living in his bones. I'd waved to 3 different delivery vans and felt a small fraternity form, made of nods and the long, slow blink of people who spend their days steering boxes toward doors. I'd been given 2 more peppermints, a cold bottle of water, and a cookie in an envelope labeled to test the mail system. It passed. I saved the last street for last because that's what you do when you're enjoying something and it's almost over. The houses there are squat and tidy, with porches that know the names of their chairs. At 32A, nobody was home, so I tucked a utility bill between the screen door and the frame and said, out loud, "It's secure," to please the imaginary person from the post office still living in my ear. When I came back around the curve, I saw a cluster of neighbors gathered at the fallen mailbox. The orange cord had been replaced by a brighter, newer cord, because Dan believes in upgrading without calling it that. Someone had set a folding table on the grass. On it, a pitcher of lemonade, a plate of brownies, a jar full of markers, and a poster board with big block letters that said, "Mailbox Ideas." Mrs. Lee waved me over like a baton. "We're planning," she said, and then, as if it needed to be added, "You have been deputized." I set the empty crate on the grass. It looked pleased with itself, the way carts look after returning grocery items to shelves where they belong. The lemonade tasted like summer's idea of itself. Dan had drawn a diagram of a mailbox with solar lights and a tiny roof that seemed optimistic for weather we rarely get. Kids suggested adding a slot that delivered mail directly into the house via a tunnel for squirrels. "Only the well-behaved ones," Mrs. Lee said, with courtroom firmness. While the adults argued kindly about galvanized steel versus aluminum, I told the short version of my morning. I left out the part where I rehearsed what to say to a man I'd never met just in case the letter was hard. I left in the part where he fixed my button. By the time I finished, someone had written "Community Mail Captain" next to my name on the poster board. The question mark did a lot of work. At the edge of the grass, a USPS truck finally arrived. The driver, a woman with a braid tight enough to deflect weather, killed the engine and studied us the way a person studies a scene that requires a careful entrance. "I hear you've been moonlighting," she said to me, not unkindly. "Daylighting," I said, which made her laugh. She checked the crate, counted bundles with a practiced glance, and nodded. "You did fine," she said. "I've seen worse. I've been worse." She told us the replacement cluster would be here by Monday. She apologized, sincerely, for the spilled crate. Then she asked how, exactly, we'd return the mail. I gestured at my legs, and the map now damp with condensation from the lemonade pitcher. On foot, I said. The old-fashioned route. Best kind, she said, and the braid seemed to approve. She handed me a small stack that had escaped earlier delivery, including a thin, white envelope addressed to me. I opened it. Inside, a coupon for a free car wash and a flyer about welcoming new residents to the neighborhood, even though I'd lived there 2 years. I laughed at the timing. Welcome, indeed. People drifted back to houses and errands. The afternoon grew warm and loose. I walked home the long way, past the tennis courts and the secret staircase. Sinatra had given way to silence. I thought about the day in small flashes. Walnut's suspicious nose, the baby's tiny palm, the quilting word daring, Dan's sloppy diagram with its cheerful roof. I thought about Mr. Benitez circling a date on his calendar. The button on my sleeve felt sturdy, like a handshake that had decided to stick around. Back at my kitchen table, the bag of flour leaned the other way, having decided its work was done. I rinsed my mug and set it upside down like a little dome. I wrote, "Thank you for the coffee," on a note and propped it on the edge of the map, planning to carry it to 44C when I went to the store later. Then, because I was still in the mood to deliver, I walked out to my own sagging porch and sat on the step I usually avoid. It held. I watched a cloud the size of a sofa drift west. A kid dragged a red wagon past my driveway, returning the empty lemonade pitcher like a hero returning a borrowed sword. He saluted me with 2 sticky fingers. I saluted back. Somewhere a woodpecker practiced patience. The day yawned into the kind of quiet that never quite becomes silence because the world is a noisy house, even when you love it. There is a particular relief to useful tiredness. It's not the same as gym tired or office tired. It's a tired that smells like grass and paper and the inside of friendly houses. It makes you believe you've traded hours for something that now lives in the world and can be pointed to, like a button that holds, or a letter placed into the right hand. I sat in that feeling and let it use the furniture of my body. The free car wash coupon fluttered in my pocket, reminding me that small windfalls have a sense of humor. I thought about driving through suds and seeing my wipers wave like old friends. I thought about the male driver's braid, as precise as a seam. I thought about the word neighbor and how it sounds like a porch, and how it feels like someone handing you a peppermint and believing you'll use it wisely. As the afternoon thinned, I heard footsteps on the walk. Mr. Benitez appeared, carrying a small brown paper bag. He lifted it as if to say, "This is the reason you are seeing me." I stood. "I was nearby," he said, "and I remembered you drink coffee light. I brought pan dulce. It is the correct friend for coffee." He set the bag on the railing and pulled out 2 sugar-dusted crescents that looked like smiles practicing. We ate on the porch. He told me about the tailor shop he ran in Miami before he moved to Raleigh to be close to his daughter. He told me how he could tell a person's mood by how they described a sleeve. "Happy people forgive fabric," he said. He told me he would bring the letter on Monday with him, in his best shirt, to an office where he hoped people were as kind in person as they were on official letterhead. I told him about my aunt, the map person, and how she believed there are 2 kinds of roads: the ones you drive to get somewhere, and the ones you walk because they teach you a thing you didn't know you needed. "Today I walked a road," I said. He nodded, the way you nod when a truth passes by carrying groceries. When he left, he shook my hand, and the handshake stayed a half-second longer than usual, long enough to mean thanks. I watched him go, small and sure, the paper bag folded under his arm for reuse, because some habits are really just love and consistent clothing. The sun slid toward the tops of the pines. The porch step, brave as it had been, finally creaked. I stood and went inside, feeling, for a reason I couldn't name until later, like I had been entrusted with something, and like I had returned it well.